Hey, welcome to another in a growing series of Fortuna admissions video blogs. My name is Matt Symonds, and I have the great good fortune to work with over 30 former admissions directors, former associate directors of admissions at pretty much all of the world's top business schools, top 10 US and then in the rest of the world. And today I'm with one of our most experienced and successful Fortuna coaches, Brittany Maschal, who was formerly an admissions officer at the Wharton School in Philadelphia. Hey, Brittany.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. Now, you've worked with, inevitably people come to Fortuna because they're applying to the most selective, the most competitive business schools. And you have an extraordinary success rate, but just every once in a while, of course, Stanford is Stanford, Harvard is Harvard, and Wharton is Wharton. These are incredibly selective schools, and people are getting turned down. So I guess you can assess your profile. You can think about why you may have been overlooked this year. One option is to look at other schools. If you applied to certain schools in round one, and then look elsewhere in round two or even in round three. But if your heart is set on a particular institution, there's this great fit between the school and the next steps in your career, then of course there's the option of reapplying. And some of the reapplication stats are very encouraging. If you look at Wharton among the other M7 schools, often the acceptance rate is just as good as those that are applying for the first time. So maybe first off, if you have been rejected, the sort of analysis that you can do to think about, why you might have been overlooked this time around. What are some of the places to look?
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea to give yourself some time after a rejection, maybe a little break from the application, put some space in between, that initial decision and when you really begin to engage in like a more formal reapplicant strategy. A couple months is usually good, give yourself a break. But then I do think that it's good to come up with like a more formal action plan, and which is rooted in really analyzing last year's application. And so I think that if you didn't do this the first time around, really thinking honestly about what the weaknesses in your application might have been, whether that is a slightly lower GMAT score, a GPA or a transcript that has maybe a few blemishes from earlier in your undergrad career. If you're applying to a school that has maybe a little bit higher quant focus, breaking down that coursework and that GMAT score and really thinking about, where do my numbers fall compared to the average admit. I think those are two things that sometimes people think that they're going to get maybe a little bit of a pass on because of, an extraordinary resume or really rapid career progression. But in today's, MBA admissions environment where everyone is, just super competitive, sometimes those numbers can be a factor that really is detrimental. So I think doing this, initial analysis, checking the numbers out would be kind of a step one for me. As a secondary step, digging more into your narrative, and so the story that you've told through your application. You could write essays over and over and over and over and always find things to improve on in your writing. But I think that having an honest look at the story you've told and really is it logical? Even if it's logical to you, is it logical to an admissions officer? Are there, maybe gaps that I really didn't explain? Did I really, close the deal on why I need an MBA? And, more specifically, why do I need it from this school? If you're reading an essay, if I'm reading an essay, and anything is sort of left open-ended and I'm not connecting, all of those dots in that written narrative, that's a negative to me. I really want to read an application that's cohesive, and I read it believing the applicant has a really good idea where they've been, what they want to do, and how the MBA sort of fits into that picture. I think that is one area that applicants can, in many cases, reapplicants can really improve that part of the story. So those are two things. You're really digging into the numbers first, and then, kind of picking apart the story, looking at the career goals again. I think often applicants have some room to improve there.
Let's start with those, and perhaps then later on we can look about, well, I need to make a career change and get out of investment banking, or next steps. In terms of data points, the schools these days, as you were pointing out, the M7 schools typically have an average GPA and anywhere between about 3.5 and 3.75. So they're all looking for academic vitality. If you struggled and perhaps had a GPA closer to 3.0, I mean, in certain cases below that, and maybe a reality check on the chances that those will give you. But are there any ways that you can then look to reinforce a GPA that perhaps is not to the sort of stellar level of these top business schools?
Yeah, I think there are a few ways. I mean, the GMAT is probably, the easiest way, even though the GMAT's not at all easy for many people. That's probably the first place that I would look to sort of scaffolding, the academic component of your application. If you can get like a really killer GMAT score, I think that there is some wiggle room with the GPA. I've often had reapplicants take a class. There are a couple online offerings that are pretty popular for MBA applicants. Many are, micro, macro, a calculus class, anything that has maybe like a base quantitative coursework. Getting an A in a class like that to really show, I might have gotten a C in calculus in college, but I have the chops to do this type of work in an MBA program and sort of beyond. I think that can be helpful. Sometimes applicants feel like they don't need to go as far as doing something like that, but like you said, in today's environment, the landscape is just it necessitates that almost. Like you have to be willing to go do things that another applicant might not be doing if you really want to have an edge. Right.
And I guess as you said, that sort of deep dive into your transcript and the sort of courses that you're suggesting, that and it also sends the signal of, hey, this person is really motivated, committed, they've taken the time to take that course. Now, throwing more hours into GMAT or GRE study, for some standardized tests, will always remain a challenge. It might be more flexible. You can take the test again, of course, up to 5 times in a 12-month period. I think it's 10 max over a lifetime. But if you've only taken the GMAT once or twice and possibly left points on the table during on test day, then setting up a study schedule and seeing if you can push that GMAT score a little bit higher is a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that back to your point about just showing your commitment to this process too. I mean, I would question if someone was leaving points on the table, if they only took the test once and they didn't give it a second try. I do understand that it's hard to fit in that extra prep time, but I do think you have to think about what's reasonable over the course of maybe a year or even more preparing for this process. That might not be as applicable to a reapplicant. You might have a shorter period of time to maybe try to dive back into doing test prep. Then a course might be a better option, but for someone that is approaching the process for the first time, giving yourself more time to do a full round of test prep might be something that you should pencil in.
Right, and we've certainly seen some cases of people really being able to turn those schools around. So those data points, maybe for some they were applying at the age of 23. They only had a couple of years of experience before applying to school. It could have been too soon, or not yet sort of demonstrating the sort of professional development and leadership potential. You know, if we take a deeper dive on the idea of, we can't just assume that maybe next year other applicants, the pool won't be as strong. You know, we really then need to look for tangible demonstration professionally, maybe in extracurriculars. So once we've thought about that sort of GPA, GMAT, GRE assessment, where are the next places to look in terms of how you can continue to strengthen your professional track, and also maybe invest in time and community engagement to show other, you know, characteristics to school for reapplication?
Yeah, so depending on when you're planning on reapplying, you know, if it's round 1 to round 1, you have much more time than say around 2 to round 1, or even around 3 to round 1, which really does not give you much time at all. In thinking about how to sort of better, you know, present your achievements, or maybe, you know, gain more achievements, more experience. I think looking to community engagement or extracurriculars when you're on that shorter time frame can be really important, especially as a way for maybe a younger candidate to demonstrate, you know, leadership capacity. Extracurriculars tend to be a really good place to go. Letters of recommendation are also something that I think reapplicants can rethink when they're thinking about applying. Again, you know, maybe their choice of recommender, one example that I've seen is recommenders being too similar. So choosing people that have maybe been on the same project as you and really have the same things to say about you. So differentiating your letters of recommendation, the choice of recommender, can end up being helpful, because then you have, you know, the ability to have different parts of your profile emphasized. And so sometimes that can be a place I think that applicants can look, and that's something that is, I think, a little bit more viable on a short-term timeline than it is, you know, longer term. Longer term, obviously, you've got all the time to think about who you're choosing, but in terms of maybe that round 2 to round 1, which, you know, we see a lot, you know, things professionally might not change all that much, but recommenders definitely, you know, getting some different perspective, you know, that way into the application. Maybe there are some, you know, sort of leadership experiences that you missed out highlighting because of recommender choice, or you weren't emphasizing enough, you know, sort of your community engagements in or outside of work. That can be a good place to sort of do some analysis and think about, you know, ways to enhance your profile.
Right. Now we talk about how some buckets in the applicant pool, you know, the buckets of the consultants and the bankers and the software engineers and so on, you know, these are very well represented subsets of the applicant pool, and a real challenge to stand out in your peer group. For many, you know, business school might be about some sort of triple jump transition, you know, the idea of changing not just geography, but changing sector and changing function. So is it too radical to then think about, well, you know, I've already got 2-3 years of sort of financial services in my background. Maybe if I'm really going to stand out, I need to switch. I need to move to that, you know, sort of fast-paced startup in Brooklyn to show them, you know, that I can adapt and thrive in different environments. I mean, do candidates actually need to consider switching careers if they really want to have impact in a reapplication?
I mean, not necessarily. I think authenticity is really important in the application process, especially because these schools do interviews too. So being honest and authentic and having a story that's actually true is necessary. You know, admissions officers have a really good BS detector, for lack of a better term, and they're going to be able to, you know, see through these, you know, manufactured career goals. I do think, however, the differentiating, you know, yourself out of one of those, what we call buckets can be beneficial, especially to the re-app, but only if it actually makes sense with your interests and your story. And so this sort of goes back to that digging into and picking apart the career goals. Maybe there is, a slight pivot that you didn't think about, or that maybe you didn't feel confident talking about that actually does ring true to you. So I think that in being strategic in the reapplication, doing that analysis, rethinking the career goals, thinking about stuff that maybe you didn't think you could think about, that absolutely can be beneficial, but it does need to be rooted in, not only what's logical based on, where you've been and your career path to date, but also what honestly, you want to do or could see yourself doing in the future.
Yeah, you make a great point, and I'm sure something that you witness many times when working in the admissions office at Wharton. Applicants that are really just trying to share what they think the admissions office wants to hear, or the career step that they think the admissions office wants to see, and completely overlooking what's right for them, what's an authentic and natural fit, because that's certainly what will win out at the end of the day. So. We work with many reapplicants. As we said, this is a chance to sort of assess what may have happened with your original applications, and we offer ding analysis with our team of experts who themselves have read so many hundreds, if not thousands, of applications and made those decisions about accepting and rejecting applicants. And then putting together that story the second time around, and with the sort of advice that Brittany has been sharing, whether it's about undergrad and how you can reinforce taking standardized tests again, or perhaps some of those bigger areas that look into both your extracurricular and community engagement, or the opportunities that you're pursuing at work and how you can reinforce those. All bundled up, of course, with a bow signed by those recommenders. So do reach out to us if you're thinking about reapplying to business school. We have specific packages for that, or just want to get a sense of your chances applying to school. We've got a dream team of former admissions experts. Brittany is one of them, and Brittany, thanks very much for sharing your perspectives on reapplying to business school, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Great, and check out, I think there's an incredible growing number of these video blogs on the Fortuna website. We hope that they're proving to be really insightful and helpful to you as you think about next steps to business school, and we look forward to being in touch. Thanks very much.